My house cleaner's panicked voice cut through the peaceful dinner conversation like a knife through silk. "Mrs. Henderson, there's a moving truck outside your house and a woman downstairs with keys. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from." I dropped my fork so hard it clattered against David's ceramic plate, the sound echoing through his dining room like a gunshot. My 38-year-old son and his wife Sarah stared at me in confusion, but I already knew exactly who was bold enough to break into my home. Jessica, my own daughter. 6 months ago, I'd discovered Jessica's scheme to have me declared incompetent and steal my inheritance. My attorney son David had helped me block her fraudulent medical evaluation requests and petition for emergency guardianship. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined, even from her. "Maria, get out of there right now," I shouted into the phone, my voice carrying authority that surprised even me. "Lock the door and leave immediately." Maria had returned to retrieve her reading glasses she'd forgotten earlier, a habit that probably just saved my home from complete robbery. David was already grabbing his car keys, his face darkening with protective anger. "Mom, what's happening?" "Your sister is apparently moving into my house," I said, my voice deadly calm despite the rage building in my chest. The audacity was breathtaking, really. Jessica had always been entitled, but breaking and entering took things to a whole new level. As we raced through the evening traffic, I couldn't help but think about how we'd gotten here. Ryan had been doing yard work for me throughout the summer, Jessica's idea to help Mom and earn some extra money. The fool must have made copies of my keys then, planning this invasion for months. The answer was simple: Ryan. Ever since Jessica married that ambitious failure 6 months ago, she'd changed. Their financial troubles had started when Ryan lost his job back in April. But instead of asking for help, they'd chosen criminal behavior over family communication. "There," David pointed ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Police cars." I'd called 911 from the car, explaining that someone was burglarizing my home. What I hadn't mentioned was that the burglar was my own daughter. That little detail was going to make this evening far more interesting than the officers expected. The moving truck was parked in my circular driveway like it belonged there, its back doors wide open, revealing my own furniture stacked inside. My china cabinet, my grandmother's rocking chair, the oil painting of my late husband that hung in the foyer. 2 police officers stood on my front porch, looking confused as they spoke, with a woman whose voice I recognized, even from 50 feet away. Jessica's voice, confident and entitled, explaining to the officers that this was all a family misunderstanding. Well, she was about to get a family education she'd never forget. The look on Jessica's face when she saw me walking up my own driveway with 2 additional police officers was worth every sleepless night she'd caused me over the past 6 months. Her confident smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. At 35, my daughter had perfected the art of looking innocent while committing calculated acts of selfishness. Today's performance was no exception. "Mom!" she called out, waving as if I'd simply returned from a pleasant shopping trip. "Perfect timing! We were just getting settled in." Officer Martinez, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, looked between Jessica and me with growing confusion. "Ma'am, this woman claims to be your daughter and says she has permission to be here." "My daughter, yes. Permission?" I pulled out my keys, my voice steady despite wanting to scream. "Absolutely not!" Ryan appeared in my doorway, carrying a box labeled Tyler's Room, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him, I could see my 8-year-old grandson Tyler peering around the corner, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. The sight of those children in my home, confused and innocent, made my heart clench. This wasn't their fault. Officer Martinez stepped forward with professional authority. "Ma'am, we need to investigate this thoroughly before making any arrests. Can you prove this is your residence?" I handed over my driver's license and house deed, both clearly showing my name and this address. Meanwhile, Jessica was frantically whispering to Ryan, her composure finally starting to crack. "Mrs. Henderson," Officer Chen began documenting the scene with his camera, "can you explain how your daughter might have obtained keys to your home?" "Ryan did yard work for me this summer," I said, watching Ryan's face go pale. Jessica suggested it would help them financially and help me maintain the property. He must have made copies then. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact completely. Jessica threw him a look of pure venom before turning back to the officers with renewed desperation. "The thing is," Jessica said loudly, interrupting her own whispered conversation, "my husband lost his job back in April, and we were evicted from our apartment last month. As my mother's only daughter, I have a right to expect help during a crisis." A right. She actually used the word right to describe stealing my home. "You have a right to ask for help," I said slowly, savoring each word. "You don't have a right to take it." Officer Martinez radioed for backup while Officer Chen continued documenting. The evidence was overwhelming, but I could see they wanted to handle this family situation carefully. "Jessica," Officer Martinez said firmly, "do you have any written permission from your mother to enter this home or remove these belongings?" The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable before Jessica finally admitted the truth. "We don't need written permission," Jessica said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I'd grown to hate. "This is obviously a family dispute. My mother is 65 and sometimes gets confused about arrangements we've made." The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent sent ice through my veins. This was exactly the narrative she'd been building for months, laying groundwork that David and I had already legally blocked through proper channels. "Officer Martinez," I said calmly, "6 months ago, my daughter attempted to have me declared incompetent through fraudulent means. My son David, who is an attorney, helped me file protective orders against any further attempts. This break-in is likely connected to that failed scheme." Officer Chen looked up from his documentation with renewed interest. "Do you have copies of those legal documents?" David, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward with his briefcase. "I have everything here: restraining orders, blocked medical evaluations, and denied guardianship petitions." Jessica's face went white as David spread the documents on the hood of his car. The officers examined them carefully while Jessica attempted damage control. "Those are misunderstandings," she protested weakly. "I was just trying to help my mother manage her affairs." "By stealing her house?" Officer Martinez asked dryly. The backup officers arrived as Jessica's story completely fell apart. One officer interviewed the moving company employees who confirmed they'd been hired by Jessica Morrison to move items from her mother's house to a storage facility. "Ma'am," the senior officer addressed me directly, "based on the evidence, we have probable cause for arrests on breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy charges. However, given that children are involved, we want to handle this carefully." Through my living room window, I could see Emma and Tyler watching with frightened faces pressed against the glass. My heart broke for them. Whatever Jessica and Ryan's crimes, these children were innocent victims. "Officer, I want to press full charges," I said firmly. "But I also want temporary custody of my grandchildren. They don't deserve to suffer for their parents' criminal behavior." Jessica's composure finally shattered completely. "You can't take my children. This is just a family disagreement." "Being someone's daughter doesn't give you the right to burglarize them," Officer Chen replied, matter-of-factly, as he prepared his handcuffs. The arrest process took another hour. Jessica screamed about family loyalty and my obligation to help my own children, while Ryan submitted quietly. His shoulders slumped in defeat. As the patrol cars pulled away with my daughter and son-in-law in custody, I realized I felt vindicated rather than heartbroken. The universe was finally acknowledging what I'd known for months. Jessica had gone too far. David approached me gently. "Mom, are you sure about taking the kids? This could be a long-term situation." I looked at Tyler and Emma, now clinging to each other in my doorway, and knew exactly what needed to happen. The emergency custody hearing the next morning was a whirlwind of social workers, court-appointed advocates, and grim-faced officials trying to sort out the mess Jessica and Ryan had created. "Mrs. Henderson," Judge Patterson addressed me directly, "are you prepared to provide temporary emergency care for these children while their parents face criminal charges?" "Yes." "Your Honor, they're my grandchildren, and they need stability." Patricia Williams from Child Services had conducted a rapid home evaluation at 6 a.m., pronouncing my house more than adequate for child placement. The alternative foster care with strangers was unthinkable. Tyler and Emma sat quietly in the gallery with Sarah, clutching juice boxes and looking shell-shocked. They'd spent the night at David's house while I'd prepared bedrooms and tried to process the magnitude of what I was taking on. Jessica's public defender, A tired-looking man who'd clearly drawn the short straw argued for bail and immediate return of the children to their mother. Your Honor, my client was facing homelessness with 2 small children. Her actions, while misguided, were motivated by desperation. Ryan's attorney took a different approach, throwing Jessica under the bus with surgical precision. Your Honor, my client was coerced by his wife into this scheme. He's willing to testify against Mrs. Morrison in exchange for consideration. Judge Patterson listened with visible skepticism, then reviewed the evidence David had compiled. The pattern of attempted fraud, the illegal key copying, and the calculated nature of the invasion painted a clear picture. Temporary emergency custody to the grandmother, she ruled decisively. Both parents will remain in custody pending trial. Supervised visitation only after completion of court-ordered counseling. As we left the courthouse, Jessica's cries echoed through the hallway. But for the first time in months, I felt peace instead of guilt about her distress. Grandma? Tyler's small voice interrupted my thoughts as we walked to my car. Are we going to live with you now? For a while, sweetheart, until everything gets sorted out. Emma, always more perceptive than her 8-year-old brother, asked the harder question. Are Mommy and Daddy coming home? I buckled them into car seats I'd installed that morning, choosing my words carefully. Your parents made some very poor choices, and they have to face consequences. But you're safe with me. What I didn't say was that their parents were looking at serious felony charges that could mean years in prison. These children might be with me for a very long time. Driving home to our home now, I realized Jessica's desperate gamble had backfired in the most ironic way possible. Instead of gaining access to my money, she'd given me something far more valuable. A second chance at motherhood, done right this time. 2 weeks into our new arrangement, I discovered something that shocked me. I was actually good at being a full-time grandmother, not the visiting kind who spoiled them with candy and sent them home overstimulated, but the real kind who packed lunches, helped with homework, and knew exactly which voice to use when Tyler tried to negotiate his way out of brushing his teeth. Grandma, why did Mommy take your things? Emma asked one morning over breakfast, her spoon creating tiny whirlpools in her cereal. The question I'd been dreading had finally come. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that her mother is a calculating criminal without destroying her entire worldview? Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices when they're scared, I said carefully. Your mommy was scared about not having a home, but instead of asking for help, she took something that didn't belong to her. Tyler looked up from his toast. Like when Emma took my Pokemon cards? Similar, but much more serious because grown-ups know better. The parallel seemed to satisfy him. But Emma's expression suggested she understood far more than she was letting on. 10-year-olds, I was learning, are remarkably perceptive about adult dysfunction. My phone buzzed with a call from Detective Morrison, different Morrison, thankfully who had news about the ongoing investigation. Mrs. Henderson, we've uncovered additional evidence that significantly changes the scope of this case. Can you come to the station this afternoon? The evidence, it turned out, was a paper trail showing Jessica's scheme went far deeper than a simple home invasion. She'd been systematically planning to take control of my assets for over 18 months, researching incompetency laws, consulting with unethical attorneys, and even attempting to access my medical records to build a case for dementia. She filed preliminary paperwork for emergency guardianship 3 weeks before the break-in, Detective Morrison explained, sliding documents across his desk. If you hadn't pressed charges, she would have used the incident to claim you were no longer capable of living independently. The calculated nature of it all left me breathless. This wasn't desperation or poor judgment. This was premeditated financial abuse, with my own grandchildren as unwitting accomplices. There's more, Detective Morrison continued grimly. We found evidence that she's been monitoring your financial accounts through fraudulent means. Your bank is conducting an internal investigation. I drove home in a daze, trying to process the magnitude of Jessica's betrayal. When I pulled into my driveway, Emma and Tyler were waiting at the window, faces pressed against the glass like eager puppies. Grandma, we made you a card, Tyler announced, running to meet me with a construction paper creation decorated with glitter and crayon flowers. Welcome home, Grandma, was written in Emma's careful cursive, with Tyler's signature scrawled underneath in purple marker. Looking at their innocent faces, I realized the truth. Jessica's greatest crime wasn't trying to steal my money. It was almost destroying these children's lives in the process. The trial began on a cold Tuesday in November, exactly 4 months after the invasion. The courtroom was packed with reporters, drawn by the sensational headline, "Grandmother has own daughter arrested for home invasion." Jessica had fired her public defender and hired Carol Chen, a respected criminal attorney who believed in accountability over manipulation. It was the first smart decision she'd made in years. "Your Honor," Attorney Chen addressed the court during opening statements, "my client accepts full responsibility for her actions. She made terrible choices driven by financial desperation, but she's prepared to face consequences and make amends." The prosecution painted a picture of calculated elder abuse that made me squirm in my seat. While factually correct, hearing my family's dysfunction dissected for public consumption felt like being stripped naked in front of strangers. When they called me to testify, I took the stand with trembling hands and told the truth about years of manipulation, the incompetency threats, and the invasion of my home. But I also talked about the granddaughter who used to make me birthday cards, and the little girl who believed monsters couldn't get her if Mommy was in the room. "Mrs. Henderson," the prosecutor asked, "in your opinion, was your daughter's behavior calculated or impulsive?" I looked at Jessica, sitting at the defendant's table with tears streaming down her face, and realized I knew the answer. "Both," I said quietly. "She calculated how to take advantage of me, but she impulsively destroyed everything that mattered in the process." Ryan had already accepted a plea deal, receiving 2 years probation in exchange for testifying against Jessica. His betrayal seemed to break something in her during his testimony. She stared at him with the hollow expression of someone who'd finally realized she'd married a coward. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges: breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy, and attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Judge Patterson sentenced Jessica to 4 years in prison with possibility of parole in 2 years. She also ordered full restitution for my stolen property and mandated counseling for both parents. As the bailiff led Jessica away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one last time. "Take care of my babies," she whispered. "I will," I promised, and meant every word. But what I didn't expect was how much taking care of them would heal something broken inside me too. 18 months later, I stood in my kitchen watching Tyler methodically arrange his cereal by color while Emma practiced violin in the living room. The sound should have driven me crazy. It would have driven the old me crazy, but somehow it had become the soundtrack of our peaceful life. "Grandma, do I have to keep going to therapy?" Emma asked during breakfast, setting down her bow with dramatic flair. The court had mandated counseling for both children to help them process their parents' arrest and abandonment. A reasonable requirement that had actually been tremendously helpful. "Do you think you still need it?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "Maybe. Sometimes I still get angry at Mommy for being so stupid." The casual brutality of children's honesty never ceased to amaze me. Emma had processed her mother's crimes with remarkable clarity, while Tyler, being younger, had adapted to our routine with typical 8-year-old resilience. My phone buzzed with a call I'd been expecting but dreading. Jessica had been granted early parole and wanted to see the children. "Mrs. Henderson? This is Jessica's parole officer. She's completed the required programs and has been approved for supervised visitation." My first instinct was to say no. We'd built a beautiful life together. Emma was thriving in advanced classes. Tyler had joined Little League. And I discovered that raising children at 67 was actually easier than it had been at 30. I had patience now, perspective, and the financial security to give them opportunities I'd never been able to provide my own children. But I also remembered the broken woman in that courtroom, finally accepting responsibility for her choices. "What are the conditions?" I asked. The meeting took place at the family court building under strict supervision. Jessica looked different, healthier somehow, despite her time in prison. She'd gained weight. Her hair was neat, and her eyes held something I hadn't seen in years: genuine humility. "Hi, babies," she said softly as Emma and Tyler approached cautiously. "Hi, Mommy," Emma whispered, but she stayed close to my side. Tyler, now 10 and considerably taller, seemed to barely remember her. "Are you coming home now?" Jessica's face crumpled. "No, sweetheart, I can't come home. I did something very wrong. and I'm still paying for it. For an hour, we sat in that sterile room while Jessica apologized to her children, explained her actions in age-appropriate terms, and promised to be a better person. The kids were polite but distant, treating her like a friendly stranger rather than their mother. "They don't really know me anymore," Jessica said quietly as we walked to the parking lot. "That's what happens when you abandon children," I replied, not unkindly but with absolute honesty. "I know. I deserve this." She paused, struggling with words. "Mom, I spent 18 months in therapy learning to take responsibility. I was addicted to prescription painkillers after my car accident 3 years ago, and instead of getting help, I got desperate. Everything I did to you, to the kids, it came from that desperation and addiction." This was the first I'd heard about addiction, but it explained so much about her increasingly erratic behavior over the past few years. 6 months after that first supervised visit, Jessica had earned the right to weekly meetings at a family center downtown. She'd completed addiction treatment, found work at a nonprofit helping formerly incarcerated women, and was living in a modest apartment with a roommate who kept her accountable. The transformation was remarkable but fragile. Emma, now 12 and fiercely protective of Tyler, still watched her mother with wariness. Trust, once broken so completely, might never fully return, but respect that was growing slowly. "Mom saved our family," Tyler announced one Saturday as Jessica helped him with a school project about local heroes. "She could have let us go to foster care, but she didn't." I looked at Jessica, who was patiently helping him glue popsicle sticks into a bridge design, and saw tears in her eyes. "Your grandma did save you," Jessica said quietly, "and she saved me too, even though I didn't deserve it." That evening, after Jessica had returned to her apartment, Tyler asked the question I'd been expecting. "Is Mommy ever going to live with us again?" "No, sweetheart. This is your home now. But Mommy can visit. And maybe someday you can visit her apartment too." Emma, wise beyond her years, nodded solemnly. "I think that's better anyway. Mommy needs to learn how to take care of herself before she can take care of us." The insight was heartbreaking and accurate. Jessica was making genuine progress, but she'd lost the right to primary custody through her own choices. The children understood this instinctively, even if they couldn't articulate it. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, Sarah and I have news. We're pregnant. Think you can handle being a grandmother to 3 kids?" I laughed out loud at the absurdity. 4 years ago, I'd been a lonely widow whose daughter was plotting to steal her money. Now I was raising 2 preteens, rebuilding a relationship with their reformed mother, and about to become a grandmother again. Life, I'd learned, had a twisted sense of humor about second chances. "What's funny, Grandma?" Tyler asked, looking up from his homework. "Just thinking about how much our family has grown," I said, ruffling his hair. And it was true. We'd lost the toxic version of Jessica, but gained these amazing children and a chance for all of us to heal. Some families have to break apart completely before they can rebuild into something stronger. The day Jessica earned unsupervised visitation rights, exactly 2 years after her arrest, she sat in my living room, the same room where I'd once found her directing movers to steal my furniture, and told me the story of her transformation. "There was this woman in prison named Sarah," Jessica began, her voice steady but quiet. "She was in for embezzling from her elderly parents. One day she got a letter saying her father had died, and she wasn't allowed to attend the funeral because she was still serving time for stealing from him. Emma and Tyler were at school, so we could speak freely about the harsh realities of consequences. She completely broke down," Jessica continued. "Started screaming about how she'd destroyed everything that mattered for money she'd already spent. And I realized I was looking at myself 5 years in the future if I didn't change. It was the event I'd been waiting to hear about, the catalyst that had transformed my manipulative daughter into someone capable of genuine accountability. I called you that night, but you'd changed your number, so I wrote you a letter instead. 27 pages of apology and explanation that I never sent, because I realized words weren't enough. I had to prove I'd changed through actions. I remembered getting a few letters forwarded through David's office, all of which I'd thrown away unopened. Perhaps I should have read them. The thing is, Mom, I spent so many years being jealous of your independence and strength that I tried to destroy you instead of learning from you. Even after Dad died, You had this grace, this ability to rebuild your life. I felt like a failure next to you. So you decided to tear me down instead of building yourself up? Exactly. And the pills made everything worse. They made me paranoid, desperate, willing to hurt people I loved. I convinced myself you owed me something, because I was your daughter. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two women who'd survived a war that had nearly destroyed our entire family. What do you want now? I asked finally. I want to earn the right to be in my children's lives. Not as their primary parent, I lost that through my own choices, but as someone they can respect and maybe eventually trust. And I want to make amends to you, if you'll let me. Looking at this humbled, sober version of my daughter, I realized something profound. I didn't need Jessica's amends for my own healing, but maybe she needed to give them to complete hers. You can't undo what you did, I said gently, but you can prove you've learned from it. She nodded, accepting the boundary without argument. Progress. 2 years after that conversation, I stood in my kitchen watching Jessica help 13-year-old Emma with algebra, while 12-year-old Tyler played with his baby cousin in the living room. David and Sarah's daughter had been born 6 months ago, and our Sunday family dinners had become beautifully chaotic affairs. I still don't understand why X equals 7, Emma complained, erasing her work for the 3rd time. Think of it like a balance, Jessica explained patiently. If you do the same thing to both sides of the equation, it stays balanced. Watching them work together, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in Emma's academic excellence, satisfaction in Jessica's genuine effort to be helpful rather than intrusive, and deep contentment in the stable life we'd all built from the ashes of betrayal. The media attention had been intense for about 6 months after the trial. Millionaire grandmother Jael's own daughter had been tabloid gold, but I'd hired a publicist to protect the children's privacy and keep reporters away from their schools. Eventually, newer scandals had captured public attention. Jessica would never live in my house again. That boundary was permanent and non-negotiable. But she'd earned the right to be part of her children's lives, and more importantly, she'd become someone worthy of that privilege. "Grandma," Tyler called from the living room, "can Jessica come to my baseball game next Saturday?" I looked at Jessica, who was trying not to appear too hopeful. These small milestones being included in normal family activities meant everything to her recovery. "If she wants to," I said simply. The smile that spread across Jessica's face was radiant and genuine. 2 years of consistent effort, therapy, and accountability had earned her this simple privilege: watching her son play baseball. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma's teacher. "Emma has been selected for the gifted program's academic competition team." "Congratulations!" I showed the message to Emma, who squealed with excitement before immediately asking, "Can Mommy come to the competition?" "If she can get time off work," I replied, watching Jessica's eyes fill with grateful tears. These children were thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. Stability, consistent boundaries, and unconditional love had transformed them from traumatized victims into confident, secure young people. "Thank you," Jessica said quietly as she gathered her things to leave. She never overstayed her welcome, never pushed boundaries, always respected the structure we'd established. For what? For saving my children, for giving me the chance to earn my way back into their lives, for showing me what real strength looks like. As I watched her drive away to her modest apartment, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us all to this point. 4 years ago, I'd been a vulnerable widow whose daughter was plotting to steal her independence. Now I was the fierce matriarch of a healing family, confident in my worth and secure in my choices. This morning, as I write this final chapter, I'm sitting on my back porch watching Emma teach her baby cousin to clap while Tyler practices pitching in the yard. Jessica is inside making sandwiches for our picnic, and David is setting up the outdoor games his wife requested for their daughter's first birthday party. At 71, I'm busier than I've been in decades, but also more fulfilled. These children, all 3 generations of them, have given me purpose that I never expected to find. My phone buzzes with a video call from my newest family member, Michael, David's business partner, who married Jessica's former roommate from the halfway house 6 months ago. Our family tree has become wonderfully complicated as we've all learned to heal and grow together. "Martha," he calls from the screen, "are you ready for the birthday party chaos?" I laugh. looking around at the beautiful chaos that has become my normal life. Bring it on. Jessica appears at my elbow with a plate of sandwiches. Mom, thank you for letting me be part of this. 4 years ago, those words would have been manipulation. Today, they're simple gratitude from a woman who's learned the difference between earning love and demanding it. You earned it, I reply, and she nods with quiet satisfaction. As the family gathers for our celebration, I think about the letter I'll write to other grandmothers facing similar situations. The letter that will tell them it's possible to love someone without enabling them, to set boundaries without abandoning family, and to find strength in saying no to behavior that hurts everyone involved. Jessica's greatest crime wasn't trying to steal my money or my home. It was almost preventing me from discovering who I was meant to be. The woman who chose love over resentment, boundaries over revenge, and healing over perpetual victimhood. The woman who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone else's destruction. The woman who finally understood that her worth wasn't measured by her usefulness to others, but by her willingness to protect what mattered most. Today, watching my family laugh and play in the yard of the house Jessica once tried to steal, I know exactly who that woman is. She's me stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who respect her because she first learned to respect herself. And that, dear friends, is the most valuable inheritance I could ever leave behind.